At this time, I'm going to ask Reverend Dr. Bennett to introduce our next guest. Pastor Bennett.
Our next speaker speaks on a study on the global impact of absentee fathers, a relevant topic in light of what we have just heard. She is a licensed minister with the Church of the Nazarene, USA. She currently serves as associate pastor for women at Bronx Bethany Church of the Nazarene in the Bronx, New York, and has a Bachelor's of Science in Hospitality Management with a minor in Business Administration from the University of North Texas. She has a Master's of Science in Human Resource Management with a concentration in organizational change management from the Milano Graduate School, New School University, New York. She is currently pursuing theological studies through Palmer Institute, a Nazarene institution. Over the past 14 years, this speaker has served her congregation in the capacities of church administrator, director of organizational development, and associate pastor of membership assimilation. She is passionate about leadership, personal and organizational development, with a zeal for the spiritual transformation of individuals, families, and communities. She enjoys academic research, reading, and art, also along with spending time with her extended family and friends. She is a senior executive and a strategist with an international movement, Jamaica Diaspora Day of Prayer and Fasting. It is my awesome privilege to introduce to you my friend and colleague in the gospel, the Reverend Lilly Porter. Please put your hands together for her.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be seated. So if anyone who knows me really, really well, one of the first things you will learn about me is, and Dr. Vassal, who many of you met this week, has been my pastor for 18 years, and he has this thing that he laughs at me, because there's a subconscious thing that I do. Within roughly about 5 minutes of meeting me, you're gonna hear about my dad. It gets a little bit embarrassing because I don't really try to talk about my father, but my father has left such a mark, an indelible mark on my life. Sometimes when I think about him, and I made this statement, I am my father's daughter. And when I say that, I have two things in mind. I am my father's daughter, as in I belong to God. And I am my father's daughter because of the awesome father the Lord gave me. And I say that with a lot of humility and gratitude. I have been extremely blessed to have had a father that, when I think of how he fathered me, allow me to appreciate God. It's easy for me to talk to God because I had a strong relationship with Father. So I've come to understand God as provider and protector and all the wonderful things that's embodied in what it means to be father. So although the topic tonight is fatherlessness, I'm passionate about it because what I experience, it is my hope that everyone, whether or not they had a biological father, that at some point in their life, you would have experienced what it means to be fathered. And so I might not be the sociologist, but what I come with you with is a passion for the church and for the individuals to take on what does it mean to be father, how do we deal with the whole idea of fatherlessness. And so while I've always had it, maybe about 5-6 years ago, I was on the internet. I rarely watch television. I tend to be an internet surfer. You know, it keeps you up late at night. I heard your nurse, I should go to bed and sleep. But one research can lead you to the other. As you hear, I like to research. And so a few years ago, while I was on the internet, just looking for something quite unrelated to fatherlessness, and I came across this video clip. And it was looking at a community in Europe. And what was really interesting about this mini documentary is that somewhere, I think it was maybe in England, and the rural parts of England at that, and the documentary talked about this community that they came upon, and there was not one adult male. It was a community where the only male you would have seen would have been a male child. The entire village, the entire community was a community of women and children. And we know that there was not some kind of intentional work to design a community in which there were no adult males. And so this documentary really gripped my heart. And as I continue to process, wow, how does that happen? How do you end up with an entire village, an entire community with just children running around and no fathers? It really gave me pause. But as I paused to reflect on it, maybe it grabbed me more because this was a Caucasian community. Yeah, these were white kids running around, no fathers. White mamas, no fathers. And as I processed it, I recognized that maybe subconsciously, when I thought of fatherlessness, I maybe automatically thought of people of African descent, right? People of African descent, maybe even Latin descent, and maybe only Latin if I think Mexican. Well, you see how we can be prejudiced, right? So you know that's not a fact. But you recognize you have these thoughts and ideas that's running around in your mind. It allowed me to reflect on my own childhood, that I grew up with father and mother, but my friends would always come home with me. And as I reflected on the documentary, I realized my friends always said to me, I wish your dad was my dad. And I would say, you don't live with him, he's very strict. But they were always happy to come home with me, and they were always happy to call my father dad, because I call him dad or daddy. So, rather than, and he was a pastor too, so rather than say Pastor Porter, Reverend Porter, they wanted that moment when they could call him daddy. So my dad became daddy to a lot of my friends. So the documentary really was not really my first awakening to fatherlessness. Do you realize that sometimes all along the way, God is opening up your heart and your mind to something, and you see flashes along the way? And I think that my earlier flashes began when my friends would say, I wish your dad was my dad. And then later on, when I came to live in the United States, well, when I lived in the United States, I remember my dad had given me a Bible, and this African-American lady asked me about my Bible, and I said, oh, my father gave it to me. And she looked at me, and she was a believer, but she was trying not to look at me with some kind of bad feeling. She says, girl, you have no idea how lucky you are. And I lived in Texas at the time. And she began to point out to me that if I maybe think that every child was raised with a father. So she made me to begin to think about it, that I shouldn't make the assumption that every child had mother and had father. Particularly the father issue was a big issue for her. So the documentary allowed me to reflect on thinking that I had about fatherlessness that was not correct. There were assumptions, or I just know, I think our brains just make up stories. But when you think about it, it's not true. So sometimes it's good to pause and think about facts. Is my thinking true? And so when I start to think about my thinking, I recognize that my thoughts about fatherlessness was really, really faulty. And what jumped out at me also was that there are these stubborn facts in life. I like to call them stubborn facts. They don't go away. They're always with us. The Bible talks about the poor, always with us. And so there are these stubborn things in life that doesn't go away. And so what can happen to us is that we can adopt a kind of attitude, well, that's life. It is always going to be here. There are always going to be people without fathers. There are always going to be absentee fathers. So then we grow in terms of apathy. It's not something that we care about. Or there's something that is so prevalent among us that you no longer see it. And have you ever seen the guy on the road that's begging, and you've known him for the last 5 years? There comes a time when you no longer see beggars. It's a state of life. It's a condition of life. It's a human condition. That is just life. So the thing is in your face, but we no longer see it. It is so prevalent. It has grown pale. I no longer see it. That was how fatherlessness, I think, came to me. That it was so much in front of my eyes that I no longer saw it. But God has a way of bringing things, even by accident you may think, to you, so that he may wake up our hearts and our minds to things that he's concerned about. And I want to think that he's concerned about fatherlessness. And I'm a preacher, so since I don't want you to sleep, will you say amen? Is he concerned about that? Yes, he's concerned about those who are fatherless. As I prepared to talk with you tonight, I came across an article. I don't know this gentleman, but he's Bayesian, and his name is Bishop Jason Gordon. But there was an article, I think, in some write-up I read, and he wrote these words: the family is the basic economic, political, and developmental unit of a nation. It is the load-bearing wall of civilization, right? You call it the load-bearing walls here, right? The thing that keeps the structure together. That if you were to interfere with one of these load-bearing walls, doesn't matter what else you have, this building is going to be compromised. So think of the family in that way. It's the load-bearing wall, that which gives society its stability. And so he says we need to think of the whole idea of family that way. He said that given the dynamics of a changing society, and man is changing rapidly, it appears that we may have given up on the primacy or the importance of family for the importance of state in our efforts to renew Barbados. I thought I was going to be talking to you, so I wanted something relevant to Barbados. And so he says, we will require a different dream. One where we see development of our nation tied directly to the preservation of family life. Meaning that if we're going to build Barbados, if you're going to build Barbados, Barbados cannot be built structurally safe, structurally secure, if this whole idea of family is not taken into consideration. And I quite agree with him. So he says, we have to dream differently. And the way we need to dream, not only in Barbados, but all the countries that suffers from fatherlessness, and by the way, it's a global issue. If we are to do nation building, we must tie nation building directly to the preservation of family life. Do you think you might agree with them? Right? And so, as I read that, I was quite impressed with that statement. But then it gave me this thinking that to reconstruct and to preserve family life, then the matter of fatherlessness as a Caribbean and a global phenomenon must be addressed if family life is to be an effective load-bearing wall in society. I'm from a family of 7, and I know most people came and lectured to you, but man, my family is noisy. So, when you agree, you can say amen. So yes, we can't fix society without paying attention, not just merely to family, but what is the father's role in families? What is the father's role in families? So this study is a 2-part session, as you might have known already. And so it is a very broad topic, it's very complex, it's multidimensional, and 2 sessions really would not even begin to skim the surface of fatherlessness. So pretty much think of our time together as a survey or raising some things that we already know. But what I'm trying to do is to bring it to the surface again, to remind us about the things that we live every day. Some of us have the pain of fatherlessness, have the gap, the empty spaces in our hearts about fatherlessness. And so it's not so much to allow you to feel pain, but what I want to do is to draw the church's attention to the issue. And not only do I want to raise awareness about it, I'm one of those persons that think that the church must have a voice in the world. So when we become conscious of these things, I think the next thing that while we do the healing on the inside, then the next thing the church must be asking is how do we become advocates of those things that negatively impact fathers? How do we become voices that influence policies? And then not only do we become aware, not only do we advocate, then how do we act? So at the end of our time together on this subject, I want us to have those 3 questions in mind. Now that I'm aware, how can I become someone that advocates for policies and just things that place fathers in a more positive role, or policies that does not appear to be punitive to fathers? But how do we put fathers in a way that the family can be healthy? What would be the actions that we would take as a church? And so I'm going to look at it by looking at some of the problems that fatherlessness has. And then maybe tomorrow we'll come back, we want to look at spiritual implications and some solutions that persons who are concerned about fatherlessness are doing to address the issue. So let us go on the journey quickly. And the first thing we're going to be looking at is, what's the situation like? What is this situation like? And let me say up front that the discussion of fatherlessness is not to bash men, and that's why I was very intentional about telling you about my own relationship with my father. That it was a very positive one, so I'm not here to allow men to feel badly about themselves, neither am I here to diminish the role of women who practically sometimes have been load-bearing walls in their families' lives. But how do we as men and women, as adults, talk together and say, how do we do this journey of the family together so that we can have healthy homes, healthy church, healthy society? It is a conversation that we must have. Bear with me while I try to work with technology here. I know, okay, you're right. Who's working on the overhead? He's pretty good. So here's the situation. And this is a US data. It's very different in different parts of the world. And it says that more than 20 million children live in a home without the physical presence of a father. Millions more have dads who are physically present but emotionally absent. Yeah? So when we talk about fatherlessness, I'm not just merely talking about the fact that the father might be physically absent from the home. And I went with fatherlessness rather than absentee father because I wanted us to have a broader thinking of the issue. So it's a person the father who is physically is present but emotionally absent. And that has hurt a lot of families of color. If it were classified as a disease, it is said that fatherlessness would be an epidemic worthy of attention as a national emergency. Maybe you don't have that in Barbados, right? It's so perfect in Barbados. There's no one here that suffers from fatherlessness, right? You know? Yeah, perfect families, all right? You gave me the impression that, what is she talking about? We don't have such a problem here. You know, that might be in the States, but not here. Right? If you take me to the next slide. So that is the situation, and it's one that happens globally. And I've just defined for you what do we mean when we talk about fatherlessness. And again, if you go to the slide that says definition, is that when we talk about it, it's the physical, psychological absence of father of varying degrees. And it affects all functions of fathering, such as the child is not able to be provided for, the child is not protected, and there's no father that brings nurture to the child. As we looked at the data and the research, it says that the whole issue of nurturing was not so much up there because maybe most people think that nurturing is not that important of a father function. And this crisis, or what I call a social ill, is referred to by some sociologists as the #1 global crisis. I used to think that it was global warming, but some sociologists really believe that the #1 crisis in the world is fatherlessness. And so because this is such a crisis, whereas before it was thought of as merely a family issue, you know, government don't get involved in, you know, affairs of the family, but it is such a crisis, it is such an epidemic that governments have begun to create policies to try to deal with this issue, and places like the UK and the United States have attempted to do so. And there has been devastating consequences when the government has tried to address the issue of fatherlessness. That is going to be like a whole different topic about the ramifications and what has happened when governments now try to implement policies. And what we have found for the most part, particularly for black families, it has ended up with government policies criminalizing our black fathers, criminalizing our black men. You know, if for example, in the United States, if a father is behind in his child support and it gets to the tune of, say, roughly about 5,000, there is a database that is triggered. You can be picked up on your job. You can be arrested because you have failed to pay child support. Doesn't matter if you don't have a job. Doesn't matter, make it happen. So we find that the methods that the governments have used to try to address the issue of fatherlessness has actually sometimes made it much worse. So, why fatherlessness? If I were cheeky, I would say a good portion of it is sin. But how does this show up? Not all of it. Fatherlessness can be death. Men have gone off to war. Their, husbands have died. And so there are those legitimate issues. But we want to go beyond those legitimate issues and ask the question, why fatherlessness? And we certainly can cover all of it tonight. But I'm in Barbados, and I'm from Jamaica, and so we know that many of us we have a history of slavery. We have a history of being colonized. And does anyone here knows what happened and how they used men during slavery? How do they use men during slavery? Anyone? As stallions? As studs. I went the horse. Basically a horse, a breeder. And so when that has been the history of our men, there is research that also says that although slavery, we experienced that many years ago, what scientists are discovering is that the trauma of slavery somehow is captured in the DNA of the race that has experienced it. So whereas you and I have not gone through slavery, the trauma of it from great grandparents is somehow captured in our system. So we have behaviors that still models that of when we were enslaved. So that sometimes a black man thinks that his role maybe is to be a village ram. You know, you are still acting in that slavery mentality, a breeder. And there's a difference with a breeder and a father. And a lot of our men have not been taught the difference. You know, there's a brother at my church that when he became a Christian, he kept saying, he has this thing he wants to say to the church, but it's so embarrassing. And for years he would say that, and one day we say, Clive, tell the story. What is this that is hurting you? And so he was very young. And at the time he said, I am ashamed to tell people that I have 7 children with 7 different baby mamas. And he said now that he is a believer, he looks back and what he recognized is that was what he saw uncle do. That was what he saw father do. All the men in his generation, that was a model that was passed down to him, that one of the signs of becoming a man is how many women in the village you can get pregnant. So the why has to do sometimes with our history and the sexual revolution. It has to do also with the perpetuation of intergenerational cycle of fatherlessness in the absence of structured interventions, and there's a cause and effect of that. Quickly, another young man at my church, his father, I remember the day his father left him. Although he was roughly about 15, it affected him. He wept like a child. He just got up one morning and his father was gone. Many years later, he became married. And tell me what, I'm gonna call him Bob for now. Tell me what did Bob do when he eventually got married? His father left him. Tell me what Bob has now done now that he's married with children. He has left, right, he left wife and children. So you see the cycle continues. So another why, inadequate socialization and mentoring of young males by adult men who have established themselves as positive, and I'm underlining that word, as positive role models. Why? With the negative influences of highly visible, poor role models, esteemed as cultural and entertainment icons. So what our boys and young men are learning about what it means to be a father is from the culture around them. You know, so it's no longer in style to be married. It's and they're quite influenced by these persons. And women, we don't get away. Why fatherlessness? I am gonna cut even. Sometimes our attitudes are not wonderful. In the States, we talk about the whole feminist movement, and the whole rejection of patriarchy. But outside of that, as you listen to Pastor Sam and the various speakers through the week, particularly Pastor Sam, as he addressed the issue of how we deal with one another, right? How the woman deals with the man. And there's this growing attitude, particularly when we're successful, when we're independent. I really don't need a man. I don't need you. And so there's a way that sometimes there's fatherlessness because we sometimes have taken men merely to be donors. And I do not get an amen from the ladies. Is that true? Am I speaking truth? I'm not really here to beat you up, but I really want the church to really wrestle with this, both male and female, because we need to do some resetting of our minds. Christianity is not merely what I do in terms of my practice and my rituals in coming to worship and, I do my daily prayer. But how do we effectively walk out the Christian life? We have to deal with some of these practical things. How does being a Christian, how my mindset is being transformed? Because I'm falling in love with Jesus. He's teaching me that you don't treat a man like that. The image of God resides in him, the same way the image of God resides in me. Therefore, when I speak to a brother and I put him down and I tear him apart, actually what I'm attacking in him is the very image of God. And it goes out the same. When the brother does that, it's not really Lilly that you are tearing and ripping apart. You're really, really attacking the very image of God that resides in every individual. And that has really been something that has helped me when someone gets on my last nerve. I'm like, remember Jesus, listen, man. So be careful of how you treat that person, because made in the likeness and image of God. God resides in every human being. So let's keep going. Why? This is some weird stats. The whole issue of births out of wedlock, right? A lot of children being born out of wedlock, and I won't go through all of that stats that you're seeing there, but you can see the trajectory in the States starting from 1960. You see more children out of wedlock, 1970, 1980. It keeps growing, it keeps growing. Children being born out of wedlock. That's one of the whys that affect fatherlessness. There's also the high rate of divorce. Most research focuses on two major causes for the growth in fatherlessness since the 1960s: divorce and out of wedlock. It says the number of divorced adults in 2008, kind of an old data, but if it was that number, can I read that number? Is that 8,444,000 compared to 393,000 in 1960. So you see how that the rate of divorce is one of the factors that speaks to fatherlessness. And guess what? The church is no different. The divorce rate among believers is still high. And we live in a broken world, but man, if we could begin to understand family, and the church can begin to make family a priority, we're going to be far more of a better witness to the world if we can get this thing right. We won't be perfect, but it should become something that our heart beats for. So what are some of the impacts that we have on fatherlessness? Most often we think of the children, and indeed, it's the greatest impact is on children. But it has impact on the lone mother, the single mother. It has impact on the non-resident fathers themselves, and it has impact on children, which is the most tragic. So the impact on the lone mothers. Most often, when a man gets a woman pregnant and leaves her alone, or a man gets married to a woman and eventually divorced and is gone, most often that woman now falls into the poverty status. And even if she was poor before, I don't know if you have poor and poor, because, the father for your children is no longer in the home. He's no longer being father. And you see some of the things that I talked about what it means to be father. He's provider, he's protector, and don't forget, he's nurturer as well. Sometimes our definition of father is only that he's provider. So you're not talking to the man, and you tell the children to have a bad attitude towards the father. But when it's time for school, are you understanding me? But when it's time for school, the child must get resources for school. So you see how we are. So there's a way that we see males sometimes as donor and only provider and nothing more. I treat you anyway. So it goes two ways. It affects the mother, and let me be nice to the mother, because now this time it's the mother. Increased risk of stress, 10 jobs, because they can't make ends meet. Depression, and guess who gets hurt when mama is depressed? Oh my God, the Dutch pound is gonna come out. Because the child keeps calling your name, asking you for things that you cannot provide. So you become angry and frustrated. So the child is at a disadvantage because mom gets depressed and she has other emotional problems. When you have depression, it leads to other health risks, increased risk of other problems, significantly poor health in females because they're in relationships that are not stable, or the relationship is out of control. And they have increased problems, I think, in interacting with their children. So that's just a few of the ways that it affects mother. How does it impact fathers themselves? And the list is much longer than this, but because of time, I've just listed a few. You can think of the rest. Increased death rate. And that was interesting to me, that, fatherlessness affects men in terms of the longevity of their own lives. And I guess I can understand it, because sometimes they turn to alcohol and substance abuse, and sometimes live a very, wanton life, greater involvement in unsafe sex, poor general health. However, by far, the greatest impact, as I said before, of fatherlessness is on children of these absent or uninvolved fathers. Impact on children was like several pages. I will not do that to you. But at a high level, fatherlessness significantly increased the risk of children. It says that 90% of homeless runaway children are from a fatherless home. Within 72 hours, the majority either become perpetrators or victims of a crime. Unattached youth, and I think I missed something there. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Children who grew up with involved fathers have higher self-esteem, have higher self-esteem. I'll forget that, I was doing something there. I think that is true, because I was raised with a father who made me feel that I was important. And again, I'm not saying that as a boast, it is with every gratitude and every humility. It was a father who, at the dinner table, you were talking with adults about politics or religion, you were invited to say, and honey, what do you think about that? So I learned very early that you can speak to power. You can be nice about it, but you can speak to power. Most of my jobs, sometimes, I'm on a job and maybe the prime minister of some country will be there, and most persons say, Lilly, you go, Lilly, you go. I'm like, I don't do your job, you go. always afraid, but I've never really been afraid of people. And when I think about it, that confidence comes from having a father. Having a father that made you feel valued, having a father that nurtured, having a father that says, you are important, you are special. And I was schooled mostly at home, so most people always bothered me about my speech, and I would go home and I would cry. And at one stage I began to become very shy, and I would not speak in public because I didn't want anyone to ask me about how I sound. And I remember the day when my father said to me, darling, when you walk in a room, you walk in a room. And when you step in the room, you think about what value do I bring to the people in the room. So he switched it in my head. It was not so much that I became concerned about what others were thinking, but he gave me the mindset that when you step somewhere, take your mind off yourself. You come with something. So you step into that space and you occupy it because you bring value. I think when I say I am my father's daughter, God, I'm grateful. And I'm my father's daughter because of the investment of a father in my life. To be honest with you, when this topic came up, I thought I was not the right person to speak to it because I had such an amazing experience. And I remember a friend of mine says, no, that is exactly why you should speak to it, because you know what it means to have father. And I speak to us as a community that even if a relationship between adults, men, women, I'm talking with you. Even if the relationship, even if you have to go your separate ways, that you have tried but the marriage didn't work, the relationship, will you for heaven's sake, do not use the children as pawns in the relationship. If the father is a good man, if the children will not be harmed by him, keep your hurt and your pain and your drama and your trauma to yourself. And give that child the chance of having a relationship with their father. Make sense? Give the child a chance to have you are doing that child wrong. You are robbing that child when you withhold, when you use the child as a weapon because of the differences that both of you have had as adults. Do not rob your children. Give them the best chance of life. Let father get to be involved. Maybe father isn't working. He's not a bank. Can he nurture? Can he drop off the child at school? Can he take the child fishing? Can they go for a walk? Hey, there are different ways a man turns up in a child's life. My greatest memory is being on my daddy's back. I still can't swim because I made him swim when I was on his back. That was a bad thing. But the memories of walking on the beach, the memories of going on missionary trips, wherever he was going to go visit people in the church or in the community, I did that with a father. You see the importance of father? Are all of them awesome and wonderful? No. But I think there are far more good men than wicked men. I think there are far more good men than wicked men. And I think that some who appear to be wicked did not have the opportunity for someone to pour and to train and to invest and to nurture and say, this is what it means to be a man. The church needs to take responsibility for family life. And it begins with the men. I know it sounds funny coming from a woman, and I'm a female pastor, but I don't feel diminished in my role as a woman by allowing the man to take his place. I don't feel diminished. I don't feel diminished. And women, when we give that space for men to step in their space, the environment feels safer. You feel protected. I'm spoiled, I'm sorry. I know what it is to be totally spoiled because not only my dad, my brothers are like that. Extremely protective. I would not be walking on the street and my brother has me on the outside where the car is coming. Where did they learn that from? There wasn't a course in how to be a man. Who did they see do that? Daddy. Dad, my mom and my dad would be walking and daddy switches around and puts mom. And so we're training our children by how they see us function. So give this thought a chance. How does it impact children? It's wicked. Oh boy, it says the absence of a biological father increases. It affects the child by about 900%. 72% of all teenage murderers grew up without fathers, and that's in the US. 85% of rapists come from fatherless homes. Fatherless children are 11 times more likely to exhibit violent behavior than children with two parents, according to some US data. Not written on my screen here, one of the data I also read, that a girl who's raised without her father is far more likely to be promiscuous or to be raped. Girl raised without a father. And so the data is very rich. I didn't bring you a lot because there's so much out there, and I know information is at your fingertips. So as I said, I wasn't telling you anything new. But what I want us to walk away with this week as we think about the issue of fatherlessness is, now that I'm aware, now that we have surfaced it during this week, what am I going to do about it? What are the policies in Barbados? Is the church interested in having a voice? How does the judge rule in the case with mother and father when the father is not a wicked man, but maybe mom is going to automatically get full rights to the child and the abandonment of the father? I don't know if you have it there, but I live in a country where it's just female rights. Should the church have a voice in that? How do we see ourselves bringing transformation? The place must be different because we're here. The earth must be different because we're here. When we said we got saved, guess what? We said that we joined God in his mission in the world. And his mission in the world, yes, is that others may come to know him. But transformation after I have said yes to Jesus says, what does my community look like? Where are our voices? We need to begin to have an expanded view of what it means to be believers. And if we have our act together, how do we then begin to, is there something in Barbados that does family life training? Can this church become a center where we, no, I'm going into tomorrow, let me stop. Let me cool down. Will you pray with me? Father, I thank you that we can come to you and say, Father. We can say, Abba. I know that I learned from a friend that there's this Greek word that it actually means that when we come and say, Abba, you do not hiss your teeth. You do not say, them again. Why are they bothering me? But you're so anxious to hear from your children. You're so anxious for us to be whole. That is why you gave your one and only Son, Jesus Christ, so that that brokenness that we experience, he has come to heal, to bind up the wounds, the pain. So many of us have had the journey of father wound. And sometimes we don't even know why we act in the ways that we do. And truth be told, if we could delve to the bottom of some of our issues, we would recognize that it's associated with father. There's a real reason that when you wanted to build a nation, you called Father Abraham and you told him to take wife, children, and move to a place. You built a nation on the principle of Father. And there's a real reason when you wanted your son Jesus Christ to come into the world. Yes, Mary would have become pregnant, but Joseph was the father. Father is so important to you. And I'm so afraid, God, that sometimes we have given into the culture around us, that we have adopted the ways of the culture, that we have diminished Father. Not just an act on the part of women, but there are times, God, that men have not quite understood the role that you have placed them in as men and as fathers. So in this season, God, as we sit as a community and we wrestle with this whole social ill, and not just social ill, it is an affront to the kingdom of God, of fatherlessness. I pray that you will open up our eyes, you will open up our ears, you will open up our minds, so that we can hear, that we will have insight, that we will not just say, this will always be with us, but that we will rise to some action, because your heart beats for fathers. Be with us now, even now, and may this I thought of Father continue to burn in our hearts and minds. Would you break our hearts for what break yours? In Jesus' name, amen.